So chapter 0, you guys can read through this. The big thing that I want to cover in here is that you will be installing Python. So to install Python, you can see this in this section here. You go out to python.org, downloads. You're going to grab this download 3.10.2. Okay. Don't grab an older version, and definitely don't grab anything Python 2. Everything must be 3x. And I would prefer if everybody's on 3.10.2 so we're all on the same page. So you click download here. I'm just going to follow through it. Whether you're on Windows, whether you're on Mac, whatever, you can install Python 3.10. Before you click to the next screen, it's very important on this screen that you click the checkbox for add 3.10 to path. Students skip that all the time. It causes problems down the road. You basically have to uninstall, reinstall, but make sure you click this checkbox. Okay. From there, we're going to go ahead and click install now, and we'll hit yes. And it will go ahead and install 3.10. I have like 3.8, 3.9, and now 3.10 on this machine. I will get rid of the older versions so that everybody's matching up with what I'm doing here. When you install Python, you're going to get an editor called IDLE, I-D-L-E. That's the one that we use in this class. The book is going to talk about a different editor called Mu, M-U. We don't use that editor. It's a good editor for what it is, but IDLE is fairly universal across every entire platform, and therefore I try to get everybody to use IDLE. Now, later on, if you want to use PyCharm, if you're a computer science student and you really like Visual Basic and those, you're more than welcome to use those editors. I have no problem with that. Just know that I'm only going to support IDLE in this class because it's universal to everybody. There's no cost. There's nothing like that for it. For Python, because it's included. But all right. So if we go back to this 3.10 installation, just make sure you click that checkbox, and then we'll go through. That's pretty much it in that first chapter, other than getting the history and understanding Python and everything in between there. For those of you that don't know, Python is the #1 language now across everything. It's used for scripting, it's used for programming, it's used for everything. It is the Perl back in the day, it's the PHP of the back in the day, the C++, all of that. Python is now the #1 language. So if you're a computer science student and you're prevalent in those other languages, Python's going to be a little bit differently, but for new people, Python is much easier to learn than something like C++, significantly easier. Yeah. So, all right. If we go out to Python basics, this is what we're going to cover for this week. So when you want to work in Python, you just go to your start menu. You'll probably have it up here at the top. If not, you just have to search for IDLE. So again, IDLE is what the command line interpreter is for Python. This shell that I have here is a live shell, meaning that when I type something in, it's going to automatically execute it. So if I type 2 + 2, it's going to evaluate that to a 4 that comes down. Okay. In the beginning here, we're going to work in this interactive shell. However, when you guys work on your homework assignments, you're going to go up to File, New File. This is a script. This is what you guys will do your homework in. So whatever you do, don't complete the homework assignment in this idle shell, copy and paste this into a text file and then submit it to me. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to actually write your script over here. And I'll get you started here on homework assignment before we close today. I would strongly suggest using idle. You could use Notepad++ if you wanted to. All right, so we talked about 2 + 2, right? And that evaluated down to 4. So the key word there is evaluate, which means that's how we're going to single it down to a simple value. 2 + 2 is known as an expression, which is the most basic form of programming instruction there is. An expression in this case consists of values, such as the number 2. We have operators, such as the plus sign, and they always evaluate down to a single value. Right? If we just type in, say, the number 2, that evaluates down to itself, which is 2. No operators there, no extra values. The great part about typing stuff in Python here in this shell, or when you run your script, is it will give you errors and feedback as to what line to go work on, etc. You will see me screw up and mistype things in this class. Sometimes it's on purpose, sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll purposely do that so you guys can see what it's like to type the wrong code. I'm not one of those instructors that's going to make sure everything I type and record in these YouTube videos is 100% perfect. It's not real. You have to learn how to debug your code as you're working along, because you guys will do that day in, day out. So when I record all this stuff, it's live. I don't edit it. I don't go back and take anything out. It's a raw session. All right. So different operators. We talked about the plus sign. We have the old PEMDAS, right? You guys all remember math operators, and you have the highest to lowest precedence. So starting with exponents on the high side, parentheses being the PEMDAS, if you remember that. Otherwise, in Python, we start with exponent being the highest precedence. We have modulus, integer division, then division, multiplication, subtraction, and addition. Again, known as the order of operations, right? Or precedence. So if we have certain orders of things as they go through there, some of those operators are going to take precedence. For example, if we have 2 plus 3 times 6, that's going to be 2 plus 3 does not evaluate to 5, and then take that times 6, right? That would be 30. This is going to take 3 times 6 to be 18, then add the 2, therefore making it 20. Does everybody get that? If you have parentheses, then yes, it's going to evaluate what's inside the parentheses first, then do this stuff on the outside. Standard math stuff that hopefully everybody in here should be familiar with coming from high school. All right. In Python, there's going to be a bunch of different data types. The 3 main ones that we have to use in the very beginning are going to be integers, which are going to be either negative or positive, but they're whole numbers. So negative or integers here are going to be things like -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are all integers. Floating point numbers are always going to have a decimal point something after it. Even if it's a .0, it's still considered a floating point, not an integer. So floating points are going to be things like -1.25. It could be pi, 3.14, blah, 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 blah on there. Those are all going to be floating point numbers. Then you have strings. Strings are going to be inside single quotes. They could also be inside double quotes, but we try to use single quotes for them. These could have letters. These could have numbers. These could be anything inside those single quotes. Those are going to be known as strings. So you can treat them as alphabetical text. In Python, we abbreviate things like strings with strs. That's what's going to be a string. And again, it's denoted by having a single quote around whatever you have in there. If you have 2 empty quotes, that's known as a blank string or an empty string. Okay. We can convert different values to different data types. So I can convert an integer of -1 to a floating point and make it -1.0. I can also convert an integer of -1 to a string of -1. But a lot of times I cannot convert strings back over to integers and floating points, right? If I have the word hello, well, I can't convert that to an integer. It's not a number. So strings are by far the most universal data type in there. But if I want to do things like operators up above, plus signs, equal signs, multiplication, division, I have to do that with integers or floating point numbers. I can't do that with strings for the purpose of math. All right. Anybody have any questions with that? So when it does come to strings, we talk about string concatenation and replication. String concatenation is when I want to, quote, add 2 strings together, but I'm not adding. So I say quote because we're not technically adding, we're concatenate those together. So if I take Alice plus Bob, as you see here on the screen, that's going to give me Alice Bob. Notice there's no space between Alice and Bob because there was no space inside these strings up above. So if I want to take 2 string values, put them together, I just put a plus sign in between. But that is not a math operator. It's confusing for some people when we first get started here. This plus sign is not a math operator. It's string concatenation. Okay. If I try to take Alice, which is a string, and say plus 42, it's not going to work because I cannot concatenate a string and an integer together. I would have to convert that integer over to a string, then try to concatenate the two together. All right. We're going to talk more about converting data types here in just a little bit. We also have string replication, which is where I take a string and use a multiplication sign, but I'm not doing math, and then put a 5 after it. It's going to replicate whatever that string was, however many times you put there. So in this case, it's going to give me Alice, 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 all shoved together into one word. All right. Anybody have any questions on that? I cannot do string replication between two strings, right? So if I have Alice multiplied by Bob, I cannot have anything come back there. It's going to give me an error. But if I have Alice with a 5.0, it's going to give me an error too, because I cannot use a float. I must use an integer. So string replication requires an integer to be done. All good? Okay. When we start talking about programming, we have things called variables. And some of you may be familiar with this with other languages. Variables themselves is like a box that we store a value into. So if we want to use the result of an expression later on, we save that inside of a variable. To do that, we have to use the assignment statement, which basically means we have some variable name, we use the equal sign, and then whatever we want to set it to. So whether that's an integer, whether that's a string, a floating point, whatever it is. So for example, here, if we take spam equals 42, then anytime I want to use spam inside my program, I will get back the value of 42. That's an integer. So if I say spam plus 3, notice I get 45 back. However, if I say dog is equal to Jack, oops. Notice how I tried to use two different quotes. You have to use one or the other when you do that. So let's use lowercase case. All right, if I use the word dog now, it's going to actually give me back the string of Jack. However, if I try to say dog times 3, what should I get back? Jack, 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 right? Because we're doing string concatenation or replication? Replication, right? So this is us storing this as a variable. We're going to have the word Jack in there. We can change that. Note that because this is a string up here, that this ends up being concatenation and not, or I'm sorry, it ends up being replication and not actually multiplying anything by 3. All right, you can reassign that value. So right now, remember that dog equals Jack. But if I say dog now equals Ben, now if I use dog, it's going to be equal to Ben. And if these names are offensive, they're my kids' names, so I use them all the time. All right. So again, when we use string or assignment operators, again, originally this one was set to hello. Then we say it to goodbye. So we kick out hello. We now set it to goodbye. Same thing I just did with Ben and Jack. Variable names. Notice how I use dog and then I use spam. You're going to see a lot of context here and automate the boring stuff as spam 42. They're all bringing it back from the Monty Python days. If you guys have never watched that show, go back and watch it and you'll be familiar with it all. All right. These are the rules when it comes to variable names. You can use underscores, but you cannot use hyphens. You can have a lowercase start, such as lowercase c for current balance, and you can use a capital B in the middle. This is also known as camel case. Okay? But you cannot have spaces between it like current space balance. It has to be all together. It cannot begin with a number, but it can have a number in it. So account 4 works, but I cannot have 4 account. It cannot begin with a number, which we talked about before, which means I can use underscore 42, but I cannot just use the number 42. You can use all special case or all capital characters like total underscore sum, but I cannot use special characters like a $sign in there. You can use like hello, but you can't use quotes hello, because what happens if we use quotes? It's a string, right? So it's not going to work. You can have a capital S spam, such as this down here, this one here. However, do not use a capital letter in the beginning of a variable name. All right. Python will accept it, but it's not good practice in Python, because capital case is reserved for classes, which is what we'll talk about at the very end of this course. So it's just good practice never to start it with a capital letter. Python will accept it, but don't start it that way. Everything in Python is case sensitive. So if I have lowercase spam, I have all caps spam, I have a capital S here, I have capital P and M, those are all 4 different variables. So if you try to set that in there, or you have a misspelling in there, you're going to have errors in there. It's also going to be that way on homework assignments. So if I specifically tell you to use this variable name, you have to use that variable name. If you used a lowercase instead of an uppercase in somewhere in there, it's wrong, because it's a totally different variable name. I'm not doing it to be mean. It's to get you in good practice to make sure that you're using the right case sensitive stuff. Because Python's way less forgiving when you start writing lines and lines of code and you mistyped a variable name. All right. Anybody have any questions? So those are variable names. The first thing we're going to do here is start with the program. So what we're going to do is open up our file, new file. Anytime we work on a file like this, go back to your Blackboard, go to learning modules, come down here to assignment, and copy and paste this in. All right. So we're going to copy and paste that right at the beginning of everything in there. That will make this so much easier when you guys are working through assignments. When you go to save this assignment, you want to make sure you create a folder of everything you're going to save it. And then in my case, I would call it Jason Zeller assignment 1. And that will save it as a Jason Zeller assignment 1.py when I hit save. Okay, so I hit save. Now that file is saved out. I can edit it. I can do whatever I want to do at this point. Anybody got any questions on that file name structure? I know it feels like I'm harping on it, but I had to hand out a whole lot of points off last semester for that. So I'm trying to make sure I say it here on day 1. Okay, so this first little assignment that we're going to build out, and I'm going to do a side-by-side here, is we can use a comment. So you notice up above, I'm using the hashtag up at the top, or the pound sign. That signifies that it's a comment and that it's not going to execute anything that's behind it. So again, I need to change this to Jason Zeller, but I'm not going to do that for the purpose of this video, because people are going to think to put my name up there. I had to fight that for a couple semesters, but put your name on the assignment. All right, so we're going to say this is my first program. And then we're going to start. We're going to start with this print, hello world. We're going to talk about each section of this here in just a little bit. For now, we're just going to put this code in. Notice that in this assignment, they actually have one over here. There we go. We're going to say my name. Notice the capital N inside of my name. We're going to have a print. Okay, I purposely put some errors in here so we would see some things. So we're going to go line by line here real quick and just cover what happens in here. This first one is a print statement. In Python, we use the print function in order to print something back to the screen. So if I don't use a print function, you'll never see it on the screen. It'll just execute whatever's happening. The program ends, you never see it. So we're saying print, then we use parentheses. Inside that print statement is what it's going to print back to us. So we usually give it a string. In this case, we're going to say hello world. Okay. The next line is print, what is your name? Then we have this hashtag over here that asks for their name. This is just what we call an inline comment. And that way you can keep track of what you're doing. In this class, I prefer that you don't use inline comments. I would prefer that you use those comments before whatever you're executing. Yes, that adds more lines of code here, but the reason is it's much easier and cleaner to work on your assignments if you use before what you're doing versus inline comments. Because if I have to copy and paste and move things around, it gets hairy real fast. All right. So we're going to ask for the name. Then we're going to create this variable called my name. Note that it's camel case. And we're going to use the input function. The input function is so that the user can type something into the system. And we're going to record that and save that as the variable name of my name. Then we're going to print back, it's good to meet you, plus my name. So we're going to use string concatenation to take whatever they typed in on the input function and concatenate it with the string that says it's good to meet you, such and such. The length of your name is, and then we're going to print by calculating the length of whatever they typed in, right? So remember, my name is going to be a string. I'll clarify that. Anytime a user types something into the system, whether it's a number, a letter, whatever it is, it always comes in as a string. So we are going to calculate what is the length of that string that they typed in and print that back to them. Then we're going to ask what is their age, which I purposely misspelled that there. Note that I forgot my hashtag when I tried to do an inline comment. This is going to throw an error. So we want to make sure that we don't put that over here, that we do it over here, put a comment above it, and we're actually asking for the age. Okay. We're going to do the same thing as we did before by storing my age as another input. And then we're going to convert my age over to an integer by using the int function. We're going to put that inside of a string function so that we can convert it to a string and make sure that it fits within our string concatenation going on. So there's a lot going on in this last little piece. The first part that happens is we convert my age, whatever they typed in, to a string. We're going to add 1, and then we're going to convert that whole thing over to a string as a whole so we can string concatenate. All right, so we come up here to run. We click on run module. We say we want to save it. And note that I have some kind of error, which it's talking about something over here. We're going to ignore that. There we go. Run module. Make sure I missed one here somewhere. Let's see. Print UB.
I forgot the plus sign right before inner year.
Oh, yes, you are correct. String concatenation. See, some I do on purpose, some I do not. All right, we run our program. We start with our hello world. It's going to print that line. It's going to immediately print the second line. Python works from the top down, so it's always going to execute from the top down. Then it's asking me for input. I can type whatever I want here. So I type in Jason and it says, nice to meet you, Jason. Note that it didn't put punctuation at the end of Jason, right? So we should fix this program to say plus, and we're going to add a period in there. We are in college, so if our grammar in our programs is not right, I will count off for grammar, spelling, punctuation, etc. So we're still in college. You still have to do college things. All right. The next part is going to tell me that it's calculated the length of my name is 5. So it gave us the number 5. Now it's asking for what my age is. I type in, say, 32. and then it adds one to that and says I'm 33 in a year. At that point, the program ends and we're done. If we want to run it again, we have to come over here to run. Go away. Oh. Click on run and run it again. Now in this first one, say I type in 33, it's going to say, oh, hello, your name's 33. The length of your name is 2. If I say, what's my age? And I say, Jason, the program crashes. The reason it crashes is because we're trying to convert whatever they typed in on that second part to an integer, and it can't convert this string of Jason over to an integer. What's nice about this, though, is if I come and look at this error message, it tells me that error message is on line 23. So if I come over here to my program and I click down here in the lower right, you're going to see an LN and then a number. That tells me I'm on line 16. This tells me I'm on line 23. So I can always go back and look at this one to see which line I'm on. It also tells you the line that you had inside of there. If we read the error, it says that it's an invalid literal for int with base 10. Okay, that's very cryptic way of saying I can't convert Jason to an integer. Right now in this first assignment, in the first couple assignments, you have to assume the user is going to type in the right thing. Okay, we're not checking yet for broken things. All right. Anybody have any questions on that first part? So you've got your first assignment. It's going to run. It's going to tell you all about it. And then they're going to dissect it, which is everything we've talked about. So in the print function, you can put in a string inside of here. You can put a number in here, integer, whatever you want. All it's going to do is print it to the screen so you can see what's going on with that variable, or you want to print some dialogue out to a user. Notice that we're using string concatenation in order to add whatever this variable was inside of our string. All right. Input function, as we see here, note that when I ran this program, it asked me what my name is and then puts me at a prompt down here. If I want to have an inline prompt, then what I do is instead of having a print statement up here, I put this inside the input. And if I rerun this program, note that now when it prompts me, that didn't come out very clean. Give me a second here. There we go. Notice how now the blinking cursor is right at the end of the name part. So if I type in Jason here, it still accepts it. Everything goes on and works. So there's two different ways of prompting a question to a user. You can use a print statement before, or you can use a use it inside of an input statement. The only thing I ask is if you do it inside of an input statement, make sure you put a space after the question mark, or make sure you do like a colon space, something like that, so that when you run it, it looks much cleaner to the user. Does that make sense? Again, we're still in college. You still have to have spelling, grammar, punctuation, and all that. All right. Again, an input is always going to be stored as a string. So when we stored their age here, it is a string of 33 at this point. We have to convert that using the int function. So we take int, we put my age inside of that function, which will return that as an integer. Then inside of parentheses, we're going to add 1 to whatever they typed in. Then we put that whole thing into a string function so that we can use string concatenation and print it out to the user. You could do this all in this one line. If you wanted to do this outside and do it step by step, it would look something like this. So we would take this and say my age is now equal to my age, and we will put that inside the int function like this. Then we can say my age plus 1, which we would have to say my age is now, my age is equal to age plus 1. Then we're going to convert that back to a string. So we would say my age equals str my age. And that will convert it back to a string. Then instead of doing all this in here, I simply just say my age. So if you break it down, you can do it just like this, and then you can spell this out, or you can put it all in one line like this. Obviously, this is cleaner and sleeker, but if it gets super complicated, it makes it a little hard to do. So sometimes it's nice to break this out. Right now in your guys' homework assignments, I don't care if your assignment is 10 lines long or 100 lines long. Whatever makes it easier for you to understand what's going on block by block, that's perfectly fine by me. Okay. All right. Input function printing. Len function is going to calculate the length of whatever string that you pass into it and return it as an integer. You can use any of these functions, the string, the int, the float, to convert things back and forth. Note that string is king because you can convert any integer and any float to a string, but you can't convert any string into an integer into a float. It has to be number, obviously, at that point. All right. Keep scrolling down, gives you a summary. In these homework or in this book that we use, this online material, there is always practice questions. I encourage you guys to go through those. I don't assign these. In bottom of most chapters, it will have practice exercises. I strongly encourage you guys to do those practice exercises. If you feel like you're struggling and not quite grasping it, do those practice exercises. They will help you. Students have reported that back to me time and time again. All right, homework assignment. So if we come out here and look at the homework assignment for this week, we needed to read chapter 0. We needed to install Python. We go through the basics that we just talked about. This is our homework assignment. To do it, you would click on assignment 1 and you would upload the Python file that we are working on. Okay, it should end in .py. Again, make sure that you are submitting this file to me. Do not submit the output of this. I'm looking for this script over here on the right. What I recommend everybody do for their homework assignments is if you come down here to the bulleted list, copy all of that and put it right at the top of your assignment. So I've got this at the top. I have my initial comments. Right below that, I paste in this. If I put a hashtag in front of it, it turns it into a comment. And now I can go back and reference at the top of my homework assignment everything that was required in this. So if we look at the requirements for this, we need to have an initial comment, means that these are in here, you have your name in correctly, etc. I ask that you use the print function to display some kind of welcome and prompt the user to ask a question. It turns out this homework here is pretty much what I'm asking for. So I'm going to pretend like that doesn't exist. So you're going to use a print function to display some kind of welcome and prompt a question. It can be 1 or 2 separate print questions. You can do something as simple as the one we just talked about with, hey, what's your name, what's your age, etc. Or you can make this completely longer into something else that you want. Have fun with your homework assignments. The students that actually have fun with it and like go off and be really wonky with it, they're the ones that are picking up Python fast. So in a homework assignment, if you want to do something particular, by all means. Those of you that are super advanced, I wouldn't go super advanced on the homework assignments. Try to stick to what's the rubric. The reason I say that is I've had a lot of students go super advanced and forget to do what's in the rubric. All right. Okay, yeah, you just did Python level 10,000, but you just missed 5 points on this assignment because you couldn't use the print function in the way I asked you to. All right, use the print function, use the input function. Notice that I ask you to specifically store it as a variable with my input. Notice my input has a capital I in it. You can have multiple inputs and multiple variables in your project. I just need at least one of those to be called my input. Then I ask that you use the print function to print that back out at some point on the screen. I ask you to use 2 different math operators from table 1.1. If we go back to this assignment here in chapter 1, we go back to our order of precedence here, which is table 1.1. I need you to use 2 of these math operators in here. Okay. Note, if you take a string and you add another string, that's not addition, right? What is that? String concatenation. So you have to use these in some integer form or a floating point form. I also don't want to see something like this in your homework assignment where you do print 3 + 3 and do something like that. That doesn't tell me that you understand how to do that kind of stuff. Get an age in or something, or what grade level they're in, etc. Get some number from a user then use addition or subtraction or modulus or, exponent, whatever, but get something from a user and interact with those variables. Yes, I can technically count this and you will get the points. However, the next homework assignment, when you have to actually deal with those, you're going to be stuck because you went the easy way out. All right, I ask you to use two different ones. So don't use the plus sign twice. Use the plus sign and a minus sign, or an addition sign and a multiplication sign, whatever you want. Then the last 2 points here is that you use string concatenation. Well, it turns out to do half of this assignment, you have to use string concatenation at some point, so you can get those points. So it's a fairly easy assignment, but all homework assignments are laid out in this fashion. I give you the rubric of what you need to do. What you use inside of that, it's entirely up to you. Anybody have any questions on homework assignments? Okay, make sure you save it, submit it to Blackboard before Sunday at midnight.